I remember going over convincing our team, or others too, convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to the press conference. I said, no, I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they...
By definition, that's extortion. By definition, that's extortion. A state prosecutor that was investigating Burisma, a massively corrupt company that Joe Biden's kid was working for, making $80,000 a month, despite the fact he had no experience in the Ukraine and no experience in oil and gas, and yet he got a job at a company in a country where Joe Biden was the viceroy of after the United States and Western powers pushed through a coup to topple that government, basically splitting the country in half, with a portion backed by the U.S. and Western governments and another portion backed by Russia. The key point here is Joe Biden basically extorted the firing of that prosecutor, Victor Shokin, that he didn't particularly like, withholding $1 billion in order to force the firing. Now, Joe Biden tried to argue, he doesn't say that his son worked at this particular company and that the prosecutor was investigating his son working at that company in addition to investigating the company as a whole. Joe Biden argued that it was okay for him to extort the firing of that prosecutor because the prosecutor was somehow corrupt, that this guy was somehow a bad guy and the guy was corrupt, and they basically smeared the guy, saying that it's okay for the United States to instigate the firing of a prosecutor by using $1 billion to leverage the firing of that prosecutor who was put in office by the people of that particular country and that particular government. Another bombshell that recently came out in regards to a conversation between Joe Biden and President Poroshenko, which was the last president of the Ukraine. And it shows and depicts Joe Biden having this conversation with President Poroshenko, where he is basically leveraging the $1 billion for it. The bombshell that's released is not necessarily the fact that Joe Biden is extorting or bribing him to get rid of the prosecutor. More so that the justification for Biden to do so gets impeached in the audio. You must identify Joe Biden as being the person who got the prosecutor fired as they were investigating Burisma, and that firing might be a potential criminal offense in the Ukraine. The judge made it very clear that you must name the former vice president as the alleged culprit in that crime. This is taking place right now in the Ukraine, and I'm going to let you hear the leaked audio tape of Joe Biden extorting the previous president of the Ukraine, basically for favors. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, and subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon. Definitely make sure you like the video. I was listening to, or on Twitter, looking at one of the other channels, and Mike from the Humanist Report said his channel was down 55%. Now, our channel, or this channel, has also been down in regards to views, especially our show, Political Misfits. That show was bringing in 300-400 people every show live. And after everything hit from COVID-19, that number dropped in half. So our channel is also experiencing the slowdown. So definitely like the video and share the video. It gives higher metrics, which allows for higher propensity for views. So this video is amazing. Now, when I first heard about this, my thought was, well, I've already heard Joe Biden admit to this. But this is slightly different, because Poroshenko said something here that very clearly undermines the argument that Joe Biden made for why he was pushing to get the prosecutor fired. Now, here's the catch. If you're going to tell me that Donald Trump was somehow wrong for withholding money, something, by the way, that there are no corroborating sources in the Ukraine in order to back up, but that Trump was somehow wrong for withholding cash, and so much so that it was an impeachable offense. What the fuck is this? If this took place in the United States, is that treasonous? Meaning, if William Barr gets fired because another government is basically withholding cash or withholding something that the United States need, would we accept that? And would we consider that to be legal, or would we consider that to be treasonous? We would probably consider it to be treasonous. Let's hear the audio tape of Joe Biden extorting another leader of our country to fire a state prosecutor.
Third, I have some positive and negative news. I will start with the positive news.
Well, good.
Joe, I have a second positive news for you. Yesterday, I met with the General Prosecutor Shocking.
Yes.
And despite of the fact that we didn't have any corruption charges, we don't have any information about him doing something wrong, I especially asked him, no, it was the day before yesterday, I especially asked him to resign.
Despite the fact that we have nothing on him, he was making a point of that in this conversation. Despite the fact we have nothing on him, despite the fact that there's no corruption charges, the guy hasn't done anything wrong, I still asked him for his resignation because you wanted his resignation in order for us to get the $1 billion. That undercuts the argument that Joe Biden and his cronies were making in regards to the reasons that they had this guy fired. That's a mind-blowing clip. Let's keep going because there gets a little bit more into it. And Joe Biden tries to turn this into political language. Now, this is a second clip that these guys had. Now, in using the political language, Joe Biden doesn't want there to seem to be a quid pro quo. But the quid pro quo has already been established. You were on stage bragging that you got the guy fired and withheld the money to do so. Right here, as you're talking to him, he's telling you the guy has done nothing wrong and there's no charges against him. But nevertheless, because we were basically desperate for that money after that coup, that we basically told the guy to hit the bricks. Now, you smear him after the fact, but it's very clear here. In this clip, the guy did nothing wrong. Let's keep going. Joe Biden is going to continue in a secondary conversation. Listen to what Joe Biden says here.
Assuming that there is a new government and a new prosecutor general, I am prepared to do a public signing of the commitment for the $1 billion. Again, I'm not suggesting that that's what you want or don't want. I'm just suggesting that that's what we're prepared to do.
Then why did you bring up the prosecutor? Why did you bring up the prosecutor in that statement? And also he's saying, I'm not saying that's what you want or don't want. Clearly, he wants that. Clearly, Joe Biden knows that. Joe Biden, again, has already attested to it, meaning his guilt in this is already understood. And him making this particular political statement here of, I'm not saying that's what you don't or don't want. This is kind of like going to D.C., buying some pot, and they say, well, look, you can't buy the pot outright. What you can do is give us $40 for a lollipop, and you can accept the pot or not accept the pot as a gift. It's up to you. But nobody in their right mind is buying a lollipop for $40. They're buying the pot. Well, in the same case, it's here. Well, I'm not saying that's what you want or don't want, but clearly it's what the government needs in order to stay afloat. Joe Biden knows that, which is why he was willing to use the $1 billion in order to compel their behavior. This is an astonishing clip.
And again, it wouldn't be finalized until, the IMF pieces are written.
Extremely strong motivation. One of the possible candidates was leader of my fraction, Lutsenko, who is the public figure. If you think that the political motivated figure would be not very good from your point of view, I recall this proposal. I do not propose, because nobody knows that I want to propose Lutsenko.
Think about what they're saying here for the moment. This is a leader of another country, a country that the United States basically was able to generate a coup And Western powers in the U.S., but in generating this coup, this government was entirely dependent on resources from us in order to stay afloat. He is basically asking Joe Biden, is this a good guy for this role? What? It's a state prosecutor. You fired the last state prosecutor because Joe Biden wanted you to do so. And now you're asking him whether or not this guy is okay for you in order to make sure I get the $1 billion. How is this not guilty? Like, if you're going to impeach Trump on this, how is Joe Biden not flagrantly guilty here? I don't understand it. President Zelensky, the current president of the Ukraine, is calling for an investigation. Ukrainian President Zelensky called for an investigation Wednesday after leaks of recording purportedly depicting Vice President Joe Biden telling Zelensky's predecessor, Petro Poroshenko, that his country will receive U.S. aid once top prosecutor Viktor Shokin was replaced. That is literally what took place. And again, if Trump is guilty, I don't know how Joe Biden is not guilty. So right here, Adria Dekrak, a member of the Ukraine parliament, released the recordings a day earlier. If a member of another country forces you to fire somebody that was hired based on the mechanisms of your state for cash, it's extortion, it's bribery, and the catch becomes, or the question is, whether it's illegal. Now, with the judge pushing on this notion that Joe Biden allegedly committed a crime, and with Zelensky now pushing for a probe, and with these audio tapes of Joe Biden basically admitting to the crime, this looks magnificently bad. The catch is nothing will likely become of it, despite the fact that they impeached Trump for the exact same thing. Guilty. Massively, massively guilty. Like, share, and subscribe.